Welcome back to the Journeys in Business series. I'm Jess, owner of Jess Creatives, and in this series, I'm sitting down with entrepreneurs to hear about their journeys in business and lessons they have learned. Hey Lauren, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi Jess, thank you. I'm so excited.
Yes, so to kick us off, why don't you tell us about yourself and your business?
Yeah. How much do you want to know about me?
All the things. It's story time.
There's so much. So first of all, my name's Lauren, which you already know through watching this video. I live in Denver, Colorado. I'm originally from North Carolina and used to live out here. Just moved back out here. So I love the mountains, love being outdoors, just like a fun bit about me. And I'm obsessed with chocolate. It's kind of a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please.
Like every day, need some chocolate. And then the business side of things, I am the creator of The Real Female Entrepreneur. Just went through a huge rebrand. It actually used to be Grit and Glitter. And it started out as a podcast, the Grit and Glitter podcast. And the focus was having real, raw, honest conversations with female entrepreneurs about the hard parts of life and business because it's so hard. And there is nothing more inspiring than knowing that you're not the only one.
Yes.
Going through all the hard things all at once. And so it started out as the Great Glitter podcast, and I just went through a rebrand, and it is now The Real Female Entrepreneur. And it is one part really inspirational, empowering media content through the podcast and YouTube and the blog, and like second part, really cool advertising platform, and trying to create affordable, exciting ways for female entrepreneurs at all stages, whether they're 2 days or 2 years into this thing, to get their business seen by more people who are already looking to work with or buy from or connect with female entrepreneurs. So it recently has morphed into something greater and bigger than it was before, but that's what I do now.
I love it. Okay, yeah. So what inspired the rebrand and the name change and all of that?
So I was doing the podcast, and the podcast was like my entire business. It was just that. And I was really frustrated trying to monetize the podcast. I hadn't spent a lot of time trying to monetize it, but I'd spent a lot of time researching how other podcasters were monetizing their podcast. And the thing that I was finding was, unless you have this insanely ginormous audience, like you can't make any money podcasting. And the other thing I was really passionate about was I wanted to do sponsorships with small business female entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. But it was really hard for me to find a way to create affordable opportunities, right? So that even women like a month in could get their business like in front of my audience. It was really hard to do that and like create an income for myself. And I was so frustrated because I was like, this cannot be the only way, right? And that's what everyone was telling me. And I was so frustrated. So I ended up taking an entire week, like pretty much off of work. Aside from making sure that the podcast was going live, I wasn't doing anything else except brainstorming, which was like this huge leap for me because I'm one that feels like if I'm not constantly doing something, then I'm not moving forward, right? And
Same
so
here.
And so it's really hard to be like, stop work, stop moving forward, just grab pen and paper and just like think and brainstorm. But I spent an entire week doing that. And I hadn't really figured anything out, and it was Thursday, and I was getting ready to hop on my mastermind call for the month, and I walked outside and like closed my eyes for a few minutes because I was just like mentally exhausted. I was like, okay, I just need to like chill out. Mm-hmm. And like the name, The Real Female Entrepreneur, came to me. Like, it was just like, when you have those thoughts and you're like, where did that come from?
You're like, why doesn't this happen more often?
Right? It was like one of those things, like as soon as I chilled out, like it was The Real Female Entrepreneur. And I envisioned, like, the idea was The Real Female Entrepreneur isn't just like one female, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's not one picture. It's not one image. It's not one story. Like as human beings, it's so easy to categorize people or, it's easy to be like, okay, you're a female. That means this. Like you are an entrepreneur. That means this. But the thing is, the real female entrepreneur doesn't mean any one thing. Like there's no one definition. And so I had this vision for this website where you could see the face of the real female entrepreneur. And by see the face of her, it was seeing like thousands of women's faces because that is really the real female entrepreneur.
Right.
And so that was really how the idea came. And I was like, initially I envisioned it being something separate. and still keeping with grit and glitter. And then as I had conversations with my mastermind group and other people, they were like, Lauren, this is your brand. Like, this is what you're already doing through the podcast, is you're having conversations with the real female entrepreneur. You need to rebrand. And then in addition to that, you can launch this like, website that you envision, like showcasing the face of the real female entrepreneur. So it came out of a place of like feeling really frustrated with what I felt like were my options for monetization at that time. And then just like a crazy idea that came out of nowhere.
I love it. And I love when people get these ideas of like, I'm going to do this differently. Like, I don't want to listen to these people that tell me I can make like 13 cents an episode.
Yeah. Right.
Like, sure. Thank you. Like, no, like there's other ways that you can like set it up and still benefit you and your advertisers and your audience and like have this whole new thing. So I'm really excited to see how this plays out, because I already know that it's awesome, but you're like the first few weeks in. So I'm like, what's it going to be like a year from now? Lauren's going to be taking over the internet, basically. That's what my prediction is.
The internet's gigantic. I'm glad you said that though, just because like, one piece that I left out of this, like actually one of the like catalysts for this was I read the book. Oh my gosh, I cannot remember the name of the book, but it was written by Jason Zook. I don't know if you know him.
I recognize the name.
He is like one of the craziest online entrepreneurs I've ever heard of. Like his business models have been insane. Like he sold his last name for $50,000.
He sold his last name?
Last name. Yes. So his last name for a while was jasonheadsets.com. And I think he sold that one for $30,000, like crazy business models. And it started out like his first business was, I wear your shirt, and he would wear a different business's shirt every day.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. So that's him. So I read his book, and like, his whole story is like, I'm doing things differently. Like people tell me this can't be done. Like he self-published his book, and the way that he funded it was he sold advertisements. So on the bottom of every single page of this book, there's an ad, like for a business, like,
I love it.
Right. So, like that was the catalyst. And then I was also reading a lot about the book, Purple Cow by, why can I not think of his name right now?
Is that Seth Godin's? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's who wrote that.
Yeah. And so like, those were like the inspiration for me. Like, there's gotta be a different way, like that, something that's not being done that I can do to monetize. Like those were the inspiration behind like, okay, how can I do this differently?
You would like the book, Disciplined Dreaming.
Ooh.
I think that's what it's called. It used to be on my desk. I read that like a month or so ago. It is geared a lot towards like teams, but it's all about like brainstorming and like being creative and whatever. And like there was a lot of it that I kind of skimmed because it like gives you really, really tangible, like do this kind of like exercise where you like throw a ball around with the team and there's like words on it and like stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, sure, I will bounce the ball off the wall. Like
juggle with myself.
Like this is not going to work for me. But reading that book, it sparked an idea in me, and now I have a new service like that I don't think anyone else is doing as a web designer. And I basically coach people through their website. Like they do all the designing and I teach them how to use the platform.
Interesting.
Like no one else does that because and it's a lot lower price because so many of my audience, they're like, I know how to use Squarespace and WordPress. I just don't know how to make it look good. And my audience is not interested in another course. And so I was like, for some reason, that book gave me this idea and now people love it. So you should check out that book. It's like 7 or 8 years old, maybe not that old. I don't know. It's still good, but just keep in mind, it's really geared towards teams.
Yeah.
But it was like in the first 2 chapters or something that I got the idea. And then like, I remember reading it like on a Sunday. I'm like, oh, I'm going to like sit here and read this book. And I got like 1 chapter in and I was like, ooh, idea. Close the book. And like, then like literally like started working on it. And then the next weekend, like, oh yeah, I should start reading that book again. Like, I only got to like chapter 2.
That's awesome. I love books like that though. And that's something that I'm not good at. Like, and like having this conversation with you, I'm like, Lauren, you should build in weekly brainstorming time. Cause like, that's how this whole thing came to be, but I don't give myself enough time to actually do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember at my first internship, we did one of those crazy team brainstorming things and it was creating the worst t-shirt ever. And so we went around and each person added like a new like element to the t-shirt. So it was like, oh, it's going to have zippers on the sleeves and it's going to have a whiteboard like sewn into the front so you can like write messages, and it's going to have like spikes coming out of the back. Like, it's like really awful t-shirt, but it was to like get our brains going and get all the bad ideas out. And so that's what this book reminds me of. And I was like, I wonder if they got that idea from this.
Right.
And so, but again, I'm like, well, how am I supposed to do this by myself?
Right. The ball looks kind of hard.
I know. Then just like bounce it off the wall, like that mental image, or try and play fetch with my dog. Like, bring it back.
That's actually a good idea. Then you have someone else. Like,
like what, and however you drop it, then like whatever word is facing up.
Yeah.
Go with that.
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know.
You know what though? Like, okay, so like teams do this, like, and I think like more in like corporate settings, but this is the one thing. I just had a podcast episode go live yesterday about comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And like this one female entrepreneur almost closed her business because she got so caught up in like the comparison trap and like, oh, I got to do it like this person. And now I'm not doing what I want to do and all the things. And it's like, man, if as like solopreneurs, if we did that more, like that's how you would get all the great ideas. Because like right now, like a lot of times you can spend so much time online and social media that you're getting ideas from everyone else and you're not doing anything like unique, like anything that's like really you.
Yeah.
There needs to be a book about that for how, as an individual person, you can do awesome brainstorming.
Yes. Well, when you start doing these weekly brainstorming sessions, right. You can collect data and then write your book.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah. Now Lauren's going to release a book in 2018.
I'm not making any promises.
So what is your favorite part about what you get to do?
Oh, the stories.
Mm.
When I like from the podcast and now from the blog, because I'm and YouTube, like I'm doing stories like across all like 3 now. But when I first started the podcast, like I was very adamant, like this is just a passion project. I don't want this to be a business. And I had recorded like the first 2 episodes with other women. And I walked out of the bedroom and I told my husband, Josh, I was like, I don't care if this never like inspires or affects like another person ever like after this, because it's already like changed my life. And like still to this day, like I do the podcast because I know that like other women need to hear these conversations, but I'm like, I do.
Selfishly, I need to hear these things.
Yeah. And it's honestly just like the stories, because people's stories are so cool and interesting and inspiring and like empowering and all the things. And that's by far my favorite part, because a lot of these women, like I haven't heard some of these parts of their stories until we actually talk or whatever. And it's always like, really? I like never knew that about you. I never knew that part of your story, or I never knew that you liked that thing. And it's just really cool, like really getting to know people.
Yeah, I would say the same thing about this podcast. It's just when people are like, oh yeah, like one of my guest a few weeks ago, she was like, well, I was in college and like I needed to help pay, like my financial aid ran out. So I started like an online clothing store and like made a ton of money, and just like I was going to the ghetto to get clothes and then like selling them at a higher price online, like all this. And I'm like, what? Wow. Because she doesn't do that anymore. She's like a coach now, like. But it was just really cool because it's like you don't see that part. It's always interesting to me to like, oh, like I know you, but I know you from, we met 2 years ago or whatever, and I don't know what you did before that unless I've read every single one of your blog posts and all that stuff. So it's like we meet these people at like a halfway point in their journey or at a certain point, and it's really cool to see what happened before all of that.
Yes. Yeah. I totally agree. Because it's like, oh, that's what makes the person like who they are today. Like they were always just this like successful entrepreneur or coach or whatever.
Yeah. So you kind of already touched on this, but what drives you? What's your big why?
Oh my gosh. Wanting people to know they're not alone. Because that's been like a theme throughout my story. Like I remember, way before like careers were even a thing I was thinking about and stuff, and just like the hardest parts of your life when I look back on mine, it's when I felt so alone, right? Like when I felt like no one understands what I'm going through, or there's no one else going through this, or I feel like I can't even talk about this. Like, I think that's probably the loneliest.
Yes.
Alone, is being like, I can't talk about this thing out loud. Like, even if you know that there's other people going through it, feeling like you can't like talk about it and say it out loud and like feel love in return for that. Like, that's probably one of the loneliest things. And, so before the podcast, actually, my first like entrepreneurial venture was a granola business. I don't know if you knew that.
I did know that. Okay. And I love it because I was thinking about that earlier today because I knew we were recording and whatever. And I was like, I wonder, like, how does one even start a granola company? Like,
it's so random. And I have to like tell people, I'm like, look, I know this is random. Okay. Cause I like to this day, I cannot eat granola. I made far too much.
Really?
Yeah, but like I did not grow up like, oh, granola is amazing. I loved it. Like it all, like I never had a granola obsession, and that's the way normally things start for people, right? They make it, or they want this food, or they love this food. But my mom was making granola. Like it was my sophomore year of college, maybe. And I think maybe she was bored or something. So she started making granola, and like one recipe led to another, and she was making pumpkin granola and lemon granola, like all the granola flavors. And so because she was making so much of it, like she'd be sending big gallon bags with me back to school and with my brothers, and she'd be taking it to work and giving it to the women there because she just had so much granola. So as she's giving it away to all these people, people actually start asking her to buy the granola. They're like, this is so good. Like, I want to pay you for this. And I was living in Colorado the first time I lived out here then. And I was doing corporate HR, so like recruiting and hiring, and I was miserable. And I was thinking about going to culinary school. I've always loved food. Like I still dream about owning a restaurant one day. So I was thinking about going back to culinary school. I love food. I majored in business in college, which taught me nothing compared to the real world of actually owning a business. But like I knew I always wanted to do something entrepreneurial. So my mom was like, well, why don't you start selling my granola? And I was like, if you do it with me. So we started the business, and she was doing all of the baking and everything because that was her forte. And I was doing everything else, like the sales, the marketing, the business, the accounting, like everything else. And it was through that business that I realized how alone I felt because as I was like watching all these other women online, like I got really into Instagram and I was following all these other creative entrepreneurs, and like, you know, every day it was like the same thing. Like, who am I like to do this? Like, I suck. Like, I'm a failure. Like, I am a total fraud because I'm sitting here posting all these things. And yet like the business is hardly growing. And it was just so lonely. Yep. And I was in my first mastermind group then. And one day we didn't talk about anything that we would normally talk about. And we ended up just talking about like comparison and feeling lonely and like how hard all of it was. And like, that was a light bulb moment for me. Like this moment of like, my God, I'm not the only one. So like, that finally I can do this, right? Because like up until that point, I remember always feeling like, well, if I feel this way, then maybe I'm just not cut out to be an entrepreneur. Like if I doubt myself this much, if I feel like I can't, like maybe that's what this means. But it was like during this conversation, I realized like, no, that's not what it means at all. Like, because all of these other women, some of them like I looked up to and admired, and like they had reached this level of success that like I wanted to like reach. And it was just this huge light bulb moment for me, like realizing that I wasn't alone meant that not that I wasn't cut out for it, but that like I was, and that I just wasn't, you know, abnormal for feeling this way. And so that's what drives me, is like wanting other people to hear that and to know that like, even though it's hard, like even though your business isn't making money yet, like that doesn't mean you're not cut out for this.
Right.
Other women have been there too. You're just not alone.
Yep. Like just want to like run down the street and like hug
Yeah.
everybody like,
Right?
you can do this.
You're not alone.
Picture like a neighborhood of entrepreneurs or something.
Oh my God.
I saw this
So
is
brilliant.
This is very off topic, but I saw a video the other day about this like community in LA, and it's like a giant like house kind of motel kind of thing in LA. And basically it's like co-working and also co-living. And basically everyone has like a bunk bed and like a closet. I mean, it's bigger than a bunk bed, but you don't have a room. Like you're basically on a bunk bed. And
it's like college for entrepreneurs.
Yes, exactly.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And I was like, I mean, I really like my house, and it would be weird to live there because I'm married, but that seems so cool. I'm like, I wonder if I could just like stay for a week or something, like go on vacation.
Do people live there permanently, or can you just go for like short term?
No, I'm pretty sure like it's like an apartment kind of situation. Like you rent, I'm pretty sure you rent and sign a contract and that kind of, I mean, it was like a BuzzFeed video, so it didn't really go into specifics, but these people like tried it for a week for BuzzFeed. But yeah, I was like,
that is so cool. Well, excuse me, how cool too, because it's like if you're just starting out your business and you're not making a ton of money, like maybe you can only afford it.
Right. Yeah. But I was like, so I was thinking about the whole reason I brought that up. I'm like, how cool would it be if entrepreneurs like had that kind of setup in different cities? Like all these entrepreneurs could come and like live together. I was like, oh, that would be so cool. It's like camp for adults, but long term.
Okay. Speaking of camp, I like have this dream. Do you know the podcast, This American Life?
Yes.
So I'm like obsessed. Like the storytelling on there is so freaking amazing. Is. But they did an episode within the past month about summer camp. I don't know if you heard that one.
Mm-mm.
But I never got to experience summer camp as a child. I know, which makes me a little sad. But in listening to it, I was like, we need a summer camp for female entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Like, can you, I don't even know if it's out there. If it exists, I want to go next summer. But I'm like it would just be so cool. And then you could throw the ball around with each other and like break together. Like,
I do know that there, at least one I know of, there's an adults camp.
Okay,
it's like in Tennessee or something. Yeah. But you're in Denver, which is like the perfect. Right. Colorado is perfect. When I went to summer camp, it was either in Kansas or Denver. Not Denver, Colorado. Yeah. I went to Colorado a few times for summer camp, and it's perfect.
I know. I was just talking to Josh about this. I'm like, okay, maybe this is like next year goals. Or I'm just like, I want it. Like, I want to.
Yes. Please, there at least has to be horseback riding.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So
see, I would need someone who's been to summer camp though, because I'm like, how does a person who's never been to summer camp
plan a summer camp? I volunteer to help.
Right? Like, oh, it'd be so fun.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That would be fun.
Good. Yeah.
So if you could go back to your first week, your first month of the podcast, your business, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm like thinking, it's interesting. I'll just like, my first gut instinct is like, I'm so proud of you. Oh. And like, normally I would have envisioned like giving myself a piece of advice, but I'm like, that was like the only thing that came to mind, because I remember that first day, like you're like launching something new and like you're so nervous. Like, are people going to listen? Are they going to like it? And I remember I had 90 downloads that day. Like I was updating it every hour. Well, I launched with 3 episodes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I'm like updating, you know, and I'm like I can remember the feeling of like sitting at my desk in our apartment and seeing like it reach 90 downloads and like crying, not like sobbing, crying, like a few tears, like
people are listening.
Oh, cool. You know? And it's so easy, like early on to be like, I'm just like, you know, this tiny person in this big world. And like, while you are like, there's a ton of people in the world, like you can also do like so much, right? And like what you're doing already is so cool and so amazing. And just because you haven't reached like the next goal that you're working towards, like good on you for doing it, right? And so I think it's so hard to tell yourself that in the moment. Like it's hard to tell myself that now. It's like if I could go back, like Lauren sitting here now, and tell that Lauren then, I would just like, I'm proud of you. Like,
yeah, because it's scary and nerve-wracking. You're like, is this a bad idea? But yeah, I like that. I don't think anybody has, no one else has ever said that on the podcast of like telling themselves, I'm proud of you. And I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is not celebrating and not being like, yeah, I did something. Like, I think so often we're like, well, this happened. And like that's you know, like, and they're like, excuse me, but also this good thing happened.
Yeah.
Like, hello, I know you had a good thing and a bad thing in 1 week or 1 day, but we're usually like, well, like this fell through, this got canceled, whatever. It's like, excuse me, did you forget the other part over here? Like, so I like that advice. That's good.
When I don't know about you, but like for me too, it's like so easy, like the day of, like when you accomplish a goal or something happens that day, or you launch that thing, like the day of, it's so much easier to be excited for yourself. I'm like, that's so cool. Look what I did. But then for me, the next day, it's like, oh, but this still sucks. And it's not what I thought. I can't do this. And so it's like, you know, it's easy to like sit there for a minute, but then it's easy for reality to kick in and you to feel like you're actually not doing anything great, like the very next minute, you know?
Yeah. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs, this is going to sound a little bad, but a lot of entrepreneurs don't launch. They don't execute. They get an idea for a podcast or for a program or whatever. And they're like, yeah, so I never did that because it was scary and I didn't know how to do it, or I didn't think it would work. So I just didn't try. Yeah. And it's like, because there's a lot of times that people are like, well, but you just started doing YouTube and you just went with it. And like a lot of people would give up after a few months if they only had 15 views on a video. And so I think it's really cool when people, especially when they actually execute and launch and take that scary step to like, I'm going to try this, I'm going to put it out there, and if it fails, then well, onward, on to the next thing.
Right. And because it's gotten you that much closer to the next thing. I'm reading a book right now. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on here, so I will shorten it. Okay. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. It's an amazing
I've heard it's really good. I have not read it yet.
I went into it a little like, I don't really know. Cause like you start out and it's hilarious. Like I couldn't stop laughing, but I was also a little wary. Like, is this really going to be that philosophical? Great. It's amazing. And one of the things that he was talking about is he was talking about how a lot of times we think that we have to feel inspiration in order to feel motivation and then to take action. And what he's saying is that it's like, while that can happen, a lot of times we wait for that inspiration to feel motivated to then do something. And what he's saying is like, the truth is that you can flip that, like take action, which leads to motivation and inspiration. Right. And he's like, just start, like, just do the thing. Like, even if you don't know what it is that you're supposed to be doing, just start. And like yesterday for me, I launched The Real Female Entrepreneur a week ago as of recording this, a little bit longer once it goes live. But the launch week was wonderful, but I had these big lofty goals for myself that I didn't hit. And so I was feeling like pretty down about them. And I was like, how do I get more people to sign up for this? And how do I, do all this? And so yesterday, like I woke up in the morning and I was like, Lauren, just start, right? Like what's the hardest thing you could do today? Like do it. And it was 6:30 in the morning and I'm like, okay, like normally I do the easier things and like check off a bunch of stuff on my to-do list because that feels good. But then I feel drained and it's like, I don't really want to do the hard stuff. So like I just started and like the hard stuff got easier and easier and I kept doing it. And I swear to you, like as I was sending all of these hard emails, like orders like started coming in and it's like, and there's another order. And there's another, and there's another. And like, they were not even from people who I was sending these emails to, but it was just this interesting thing. Like, if you just start, like, and sure, that could have not happened, but it feels better to just start than to not. And then to like look back. But what if I would have done that? Would have worked? What if I would have launched that YouTube channel or thing? Like what would have happened? Like, it's so much better to do it and to actually see it happen and to know what the result was than to like sit there wondering like, what if you didn't?
Amen, sister. I love that. So if you were starting your business over totally fresh tomorrow, what would you do differently?
The launch. Which is funny because after starting my first business, the granola business, I said that same thing. And so I went into the like rebrand saying like I gave myself an entire month off between when I ended season 2 of the podcast and when this was going to launch. And in hindsight, I'm glad that I just did it. I'm glad that I started when I started and I didn't push the launch date back anymore because sometimes you do just have to start. But my goal was like to really like go into the launch with like an amazing promotional and marketing strategy. And while I did have some of that in place, it wasn't at all what I envisioned it being. And there were so many things on my to-do list that did not get done beforehand that I'm now doing now. But if I could go back and do it differently, if I could have, initially known like, Lauren, give yourself a month and a half or give yourself 2 months. I would have done that. But at the same time, it is what it is. Like, and I'm doing these things now, but I agree with you. Like, I think that the launch and the time that you spend beforehand, like preparing and getting ready for these things, like can truly dictate, like, how it turns out, like at least in the stages. And so if I had to do anything differently, it would be that 100%.
Yeah. I think a lot of people underestimate how much goes into a launch.
Yeah.
Like there's like the setup or the creation of whatever it is that you're actually launching, but there's like all the blog posts and podcasts and ads and sales pages and like collaborations and webinars and whatever else you need to do to launch your thing. And people are like, oh, I can't just like put this out here, because I'm guilty of that sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, like I should have launched that better. So I think that's a really good thing to think about whenever we're launching something, is give ourselves more time to do it. But I'm also really proud of you, because you were like, I'm just gonna do it. Like I didn't get all this done. That's okay. I'm just gonna do it anyway. Like, because there's always going to be something. That's the thing. There's always more that we can tweak or write or post. And it's like, at a certain point, you just have to like push it out. Just put it out there.
Yeah. It's like, is it good enough? Like, then do it, because then you can start getting that feedback and people can start talking about it and you can start gaining some momentum. Yeah. The other thing too, like I don't know if this is everyone, but I know it's definitely me. It's like when you have that new idea and you're excited to launch something, it's so hard to delay the launch and order everything in place, because you're like, I just want everyone to know.
That is my problem. Like anybody who knows me very well, like in my business, there's been a few times, not like huge things, but like new little ebooks or digital downloads. I'll like create it and put it on my website within like 2 weeks. I'm like, okay. Like this podcast, I got the idea, and within 2 weeks I started it, and I was like, there you go.
I remember you saying that.
And I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I should have like done an actual launch, or like had people help me promote it, or something, like build up anticipation. Instead, it was like, I remember it was like the Wednesday before my first episode was going out, and I was like, I should probably tell people that I have a podcast coming out on Friday. Like, maybe I should do that. And I was like, and then what was it? Like, most podcasts, their first episode is like the host talking about the podcast. No, I started my podcast in October last year. And then in April, I did an episode of me.
It's okay. Hey, you were doing things your own way.
I was just, so I had a friend interview me for the episode, and it was funny because it was like, well, usually we do these at the beginning of of the podcast, but I decided to wait, like 8 months or so. So, hi guys.
But like with that being said, like there's also something to be said for like people started listening to your podcast and seeing what you were doing, and loving what you were doing. And then they got to know you. Like you can make launches like as amazing as you can possibly make them, but then there's also so much that you can do after you launch, like to get that same, attention and expression.
Do things maybe the right way, I mean, it's whatever. I got an idea and I went with it. I didn't really think all the steps through.
At least you did it.
Yes.
At least you did it. At least you launched it.
Yes. So what are you working on for the rest of 2017?
Oh my gosh, the Real Female Entrepreneur. So like both sides, the, inspirational media side, which is the podcast. There is content on my YouTube channel, but I'm really excited to like do more of that, like more of, shorter conversations from the podcast, but like talking with female entrepreneurs and having these like honest conversations. The blog is something that I never like when it was just Skirt and Glitter, I wasn't utilizing the blog at all, like not pushing any content out there. And now I am, which is like really exciting. So I like launched with a new series called Behind the Homepage, where you actually get to know the women on the homepage. So
nice.
Yeah, because it's like, there's so many amazing women, and I only have so many spots on the podcast where you can actually like get to know them and their stories. And so this is another way to like get to know the women that are actually on the homepage, aside from just hovering over their photos and reading a little bit about them there. Like, it like walks you through their story and like what their biggest struggles are. And just, trying to transfer like the real raw hard parts of the conversations from the podcast to the blog. So really building out all of that content and like trying to continue creating a lot more of it. And then growing the homepage. I envision the homepage being this amazing like space to go and like find and connect with and network with and buy from like awesome women doing awesome things, right? Like I even have this vision. I'm like, oh my God, like during the holidays, like if you're like, okay, I want to shop small and I want to shop female small, like let me go here and find all the Etsy shop owners or product shop owners that I can actually buy gifts from, or, at any time, if you're like starting a website and you want to find someone to build your website for you, or you're getting married and you want a photographer, right? There's women doing so many different amazing coaches. I really envision it being this amazing search engine hub. And there's so much more that I want to do to it to make it even more amazing and like a cooler, experience for people like visiting the homepage than it is right now. So getting more women on the homepage, and like growing it into this really cool thing that like I know it can be. So those are like my 2 focuses for the rest of the year.
I love it.
Yeah.
So cool. So where can we connect with you online to listen to your podcast, follow social media and all that fun stuff?
Yeah. So the main hub for all of it is therealfemaleentrepreneur.com. On social media, you can find me at The Real Female Entrepreneur, and the podcast is The Real Female Entrepreneur as well. So wherever you're looking,
easy to remember,
just search for The Real Female Entrepreneur. And if you forget, you can go to the website. It's all there.
There you go. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Yeah. Thank you, Jess. This has been so fun.